There you go. There's the bells. Okay, so we haven't got anybody to co-opt, and we've got one apology, and Councillor Fox hasn't arrived yet, so I'm assuming that they're coming to the meeting. But Alderman Barakis is an apology. Moving on to number 2, confirmation of minutes. Has everyone read the minutes? Anyone like to move those? Lord Mayor was in by nanosecond. No dissent. Declare that carried. Item 3, supplementary items. We don't have any. Item 4, indications of pecuniary and conflicts of interest. Anyone? There being none. Transfer of agenda items. Are we happy with the order today? Okay. Item 6 is reports. We'll move on to item 6. Yep.
Sorry, Chairman. Just to indicate that I think there might be a couple of suggested deferments, but no rearranging of the actual order.
Yep. Okay. So I'll go with the current order. Okay. 6.1 in the reports is asset management policy and strategy update. So our recommendation is, I think we receive a note that the update asset management policy and strategy marked as attachment A and B to this report be approved. Is there any issues with this that we should be aware of? Either of the directors, or it's pretty straightforward as I thought when I read through it?
I think predominantly, Chairman, it's just making the document a little bit more contemporary and addressing some of the issues. It is Mr. Carr's directorate, and although Robert's with us this evening, he's there for another item. So I think if we did have any questions or concerns, we might need to perhaps defer this one to another day. But if the committee's happy, then yes, as I understand it, the changes are minimal. Okay.
Is there any discussion, councillors?
No.
No? Okay, well, I'll put the item. All those in favour of receiving a no dissent. Okay, I'll declare that carried. Item 6.2 is the Waste Management Strategy Annual Progress Report 2020-21. So I was pretty pleased reading this with the progress that we're continuing to make with regard to waste. I'll open the item for discussion.
I'm happy to move it, Chair. Yeah, absolutely. Lots of really good news in the report. I was wanting to suggest that we add an extra item which I guess reflects the good news in it, just that that communications materials are developed to promote progress on this strategy. And I won't include that in the I won't include any further sort of detail other than that as part of the motion. But I think what I'm sort of thinking of is like those kind of Facebook squares or those kind of graphic visuals that really tell very clearly for people just, you know, the progress on that the City of Hobart's made. So if I can move it with that with the condition that communications materials are developed to promote progress on the strategy.
Okay, yep. Thank you. Deputy.
Thanks, Chairman. Yeah, look, it's a really good news story. It's so good to see this progressing so well. So congratulations to Glenn and his team and Jeff and so forth, and David. Is there any area that is going to be difficult to deliver, Glenn, or is it just sort of chugging along over that time period that we're expecting?
Thanks, Deputy, and through you, Chairman, and Jeff might want to comment as well, because I think we all know that Jeff is the powerhouse behind a lot of this work. Certainly, I think it is fair to say that we've picked a lot of low-hanging fruit. You know that we've got an item in close tonight that talks about our FOGO collection, and committee is well aware that we're in the market at the moment for a new processor for recycling. I think as we move forward, and it's great to see that I think in the last 2 days, the state government have introduced both the container refund scheme legislation yesterday and the landfill waste levy legislation today. So it's great to see the state government coming on board with their policy levers. And COVID has given us a bit of a rough time in terms of strategy implementation. But as I was saying, we've picked a lot of the low-hanging fruit. It really is a matter now of consolidating our gains and getting more serious about education and repurposing of materials at the landfill in particular. Getting as much of the cardboard and recyclables off the walking floor as we can. And given the current activity in the building sector, really doing all we can to make sure we're getting optimal recovery of those building materials. So I think they are the priorities we've got coming. Now, we've always known that ours is a fairly ambitious target to have zero waste to landfill by 2030. And we are starting to get to the business end of that. So we need to certainly not take the foot off the accelerator and look to how we can and make these significant gains going forward. Jeff, have you got anything you wanted to add to that?
No, I think you're pretty spot on, Glenn. Sorry, through the chair. The big thing will be the construction and demolition sector of Hobart, because that's really the stuff that is quite heavy and adds a lot of the tonnages, and quite often it's not sorted as well as it should be, and a lot of the things like concrete and glass and timbers can and should be reused. So that'll be our battle as to how we do that moving forward on site up at McGroby's and at the source at the waste generation space.
Is there ways of doing that through the planning scheme? Maybe Neil might be able to answer that.
Yeah, I mean, we do impose the condition around having a waste management plan around construction. So we do try and get them to have that plan, but it may be that there's an auditing process that needs to be undertaken with some of these larger developments, and also going out to the industry itself, being a little bit more proactive in that space. So, if we're hearing that is the major source of waste, that we can start to hit up some of those bigger companies to work them a bit harder on that on this side of the equation.
I think, Chairman, if I can just add that the introduction of the waste levy is certainly, Jeff and I are already noticing a lot of interest from folk who haven't had an interest necessarily historically of reducing stuff to landfill. And I think as the levy comes in, and particularly as it moves through its increases from $20 up to $60 a tonne, commercially, a lot more people will look at diverting stuff from landfill. So I think that state government initiative is a really important one.
Yep. Yeah, couldn't agree more. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, but over time, we'll hopefully see that particular component of waste, with the landfill levy and also better mechanisms. So
Can I just ask,
once the landfill levy is set, I'd like to see the data as it comes through, and how much of the building and construction waste has decreased when it hits the $20 is introduced. So that'll be interesting figures to see. Yep.
So can I just ask, Chair, is there, apart from the waste levy, is that the only thing we can do? Is there anything more that we could do locally, or is it really just not? Is that the main game, ensuring that comes in?
No, look, I think, Chairman, Lord Mayor, to answer your question, it's a multifaceted approach. The levy is a policy lever that's going to help people avoid putting stuff in landfill. So that sort of underpins it. Once we do get our processes for both FOGO and recycling locked in, and we've got confidence there, we can promote both those services more heavily. So encourage increased recycling because we know we've got a good processor to deal with it. Increased FOGO because we know we've got a way of dealing with that. and we do continue to work with the building and construction industry. I think one of our next key issues is going to be looking at the layout of McRoby's Gully and looking to see what additional investment up there could provide us in terms of additional sorting, because once the stuff goes on the walking floor, we need to be able to recover as much as possible. Now, you know, Jeff and I have certainly looked at a number of places where the material actually goes through a sorting process before it hits the compactor, because once we've locked in the processes for sure, and once we've encouraged and educated and all of that, the people to optimise recycling and FOGO, it's then really us sorting again. I think, Jeff, isn't it? But that's going to take some investment and also some reconfiguration of the existing infrastructure at McRoby's to accommodate that. Jeff, have you got anything to add there?
No, 100%, Glenn. That's exactly right. There's things we can look to do in the future up at McRoby's Gully to sort that stuff at end of pipe, if you like, while still encouraging people to do all the right things at the front of the system. But there's also a fair bit about developing end markets, local end markets for viable product reuse for a lot of these items. It's one thing to actually pull them out, but if there's not an end market that's a viable product, then it makes it a lot harder. So, you know, things like concrete, where we're starting to increase that, using that in civil works, and, you know, we're trialling glass recycling and that sort of thing. So we're looking to increase those kind of operations, and certainly there's a level of infrastructure we could look at investing in McRoby's Gully to sort of improve those processes over the next, 5 to 10 years.
Mm. So, Jeff, do you think there's any emerging industries, or has there been any emerging industries talking to us? I'm probably a bit, I don't know, confidential maybe, but I'm hopeful that with the landfill levy and some funds, or some contestable funds through grants, might kickstart some new industries around waste.
Yeah, look, there's always people kicking around with ideas and different scales of operations. But I think the big one at the moment, aside from the recent infrastructure into the recycling, is the organic sector. There's some real interest at a state government level and some recognition that we don't have good enough data around the organics being generated and produced, and where can that actually be composted and turned into a valuable resource. So they've actually committed under their waste action plan some significant funding into the organic sector in this coming year, and also things like tyres and rubber crumb and things like that. They're putting in investment into that and grants programs and that sort of thing. But I think particularly relevant for us at the moment is the organics processing and data capturing that in the south.
What about textiles? Is there any action going on there? Yeah. I knew something in the pipes.
Yeah, we've got that pilot program we're working towards at the moment. That should be up and running within the next month down here. There's people talking to us about mattress recycling, which has been kicking around for a while, but hopefully we might see something on that this financial year. Broad scale textiles, not quite there yet, but hopefully soon.
All right. Okay.
I think the only other comment, Chairman, without wanting to delay the conversation, is we will need, as a council and really as a region and probably as a state, to start to have a serious conversation about waste to energy technology, and make a decision to determine the extent to which we want to get reusables out of the waste stream versus the potential for finding technology that's scalable to suit the Tasmanian or regional environment that can convert what's left into energy rather than sticking it in a hole. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of work happening on that in that space, and certainly Jeff and I have been made continually made aware of how those technologies and those units are getting scaled to be perhaps more suitable for the tonnage of waste that we deliver. I mean, if we go back 5 years, there needed to be massive quantities of waste for it to be effective, and there needed to be incredibly high gate fees for it to be economically viable. Now, once we've got a levy of $60 a tonne plus the $100 a tonne that we would charge, all of a sudden this technology starts to have some capacity. So that waste to energy technology and the waste to energy approach is something that I think is really going to ramp up in coming years, and we'll need to make some decisions on.
Yeah. No, I've been waiting for this debate to occur. Yep. Councillor Fox, do you have any comments? Okay, welcome to the meeting. All right.
So can I ask one more question around metal recycling and whether, because when I go up to the, and look at the floor, there's just all this kind of cheap metal and sort of household kind of general detritus that doesn't, and the tip shop's got a lot of it too. But is that adequately serviced in Tassie?
Through the chair, yes. We've got a contract for our metals salvage contract and recycling, and they do a good job, and they've got all the right accreditations and that sort of gear. And whenever that comes up for contract, there's definitely interest in the metals recycling sector. So yes, there's plenty of avenues for that.
Okay. Well, if there's no further comments, we'll move on. Would somebody like to move the recommendation?
I did, Councillor Harvey, with that amendment about the communication.
Okay, yep, all right then. So I'll put that. Any objections to the recommendation? There being none, I'll declare that carried. And thanks, Jeff and Co, for the effort with reducing our waste. Item 6.3, improvements to pedestrian crossings.
Yeah. Did you want me to introduce this one?
Yep.
Yeah, look, there's a number of these items that are coming out of the action report that has been on the books for some time, and we sought an opportunity to report on those, and this is the first of them. We've done clearly a lot of work in this space in a general sense. With our precincts plan, but also with our grant funding for vulnerable road users and black spots and the like. So I suppose it's sort of ingrained to a large extent with a lot of our street improvements that we've been undertaking over the last 5 to 10 years. The more substantive work will be done as part of the local area mobility plans that we propose to roll out in the suburbs in particular, and with the aim of looking at in details, particularly connections to some of those smaller retail precincts, but also to schools and the like that exist in those suburbs. So we will be looking at those networks and improvements to those crossings as part of that program.
Mm-hmm. All right. Any comments, councillors? Deputy?
Yeah, just a question to Mr. Noy. So when we do the lamps, the local area plans, mobility plans, we'll be looking at specific key sites such as schools or shops or whatever, and how that might link. And so that's one question, but this work that has already been done on Elizabeth Street and identifying each of those crossings and the quality or otherwise of those sites, how does that fit into the overall plan that we're approaching, how we're approaching this?
Yeah, so well, first of all, yes, to your question, your first question. I mean, there has been work done around particular schools already, but we want to look more broadly at those longer connections within those suburbs. In relation to the Elizabeth Street corridor, clearly some of the work has been picked up as part of the Newtown precinct upgrade. also as part of the Midtown precinct upgrade. And we will want to ensure that all of those improvements are ultimately dealt with as part of that expanded, I suppose, either side of those two key areas of current improvement that we're looking at. So it'll be a progressive exercise of when we get funding, Deputy Lord Mayor, as to improve those streets, that street.
So just a subsequent question then. So we'll see those priorities as they come up, or I mean, how do we identify or how do we prioritise what we feel the priority?
Yeah, look, we currently at the moment obviously have sought funding and been successful in gaining funding for some of those improved crossing points as part of the vulnerable road user scheme that have been identified in detail as a result of the precincts upgrades. That is in Newtown and that is in Midtown. So we've received in the last year or so funding improvements, and we will because we thought we could, because we were going to be focusing on those areas, that it was prudent to seek that funding for those areas as an overall concept. So that's occurring, and so we will look to other areas progressively in future years. We can't do it all at once. We can't. We won't get that funding, and two, we don't have the resources to manage that extensive capital works program at any one time. So it's a progressive thing. As I said, we've look to focus on those precincts that were priority council, and then we'll progressively expand that as we work through those programs.
Okay.
Can
Lord Mayor?
thank you. I think it's a little bit sad in a way that this motion from 6 years ago, we don't have a really clear, we've never really got a super clear, simple report on here's where we're going to put pedestrian priority crossings over the next 10 years. We somehow, and I'm not blaming anyone, but I'm just feeling like somehow we're very good at producing lots of really big planning documents, but our delivery, sometimes, of course we're delivering things, but this was a very clear request on the pedestrian priority crossings. I also worry that apart from Salamanca, where the work's obviously really clear, there's been a clear improvement in pedestrian priority crossings, I do worry that we still prefer the refuges to pedestrian priority crossings, and I think refuges are just simply not adequate or modern pedestrian technology in sort of particularly neighbourhood shopping areas and those sort of things. I mean, they're just really, I think they're becoming seen as almost not adequate or certainly not as safe. And I did also want to ask just what, the lamps are good and we approved that just recently, but I'm just a bit worried that, we had a transport strategy process that sort of seemed to last for about 3 years, and now I'm just worried the lamps is another planning process that might last another 3 years. I mean, and it's great that we've got the two, the Newtown and Midtown, because they are going to be very practical, but will we be guaranteed that those Newtown, Midtown projects actually will include pedestrian priority crossings, not just refuges? Because that's the sort of point we're trying, I think that's, if you want to be a pedestrian friendly city, you do have to, have those facilities where it is pedestrian priority, not just pedestrian has to sort of run into the middle of the road and then wait and run again.
Look, I'm a little bit confused, Lord Mayor, because we've clearly the priorities have been identified by council through the precinct upgrades. That's been our focus. We've presented plans to council, including Newtown, including Midtown. They've been endorsed. I'm just wondering, and we go through the vulnerable road use funding approach. So, and we're struggling to deliver those the existing programs that projects that you've signed off in detail. So, I'm not quite sure what more that you might be looking at other than a grander plan. And we are looking at that as part of the precincts plan, I suppose, in the CBD. But I'm not quite sure, what we can do in addition to what we're already doing, I suppose.
Well, I guess it's rather than ever putting another refuge in, actually putting less refuges, more pedestrian priority, like real crossings is what.
Yeah.
And I think that was the whole genesis of this motion. But I'm not sure we've sort of, apart from Salamanca, where it's very clear we're now comfortable with pedestrian crossings, I'm just not sure we're sort of still quite there. But I'm happy to just move the motion as it is, but I wouldn't mind if we could actually, because I think everything's moving in this space all the time in terms of what research is being found out about refuges and if they're safe, and wombat crossings and if they're safe. And so I'm hoping I could move it with an amendment that a briefing be organised for elected members by the Australian Road Research Board on their latest research on safe systems and pedestrian crossing infrastructure. And I can send that if I need to, but I just want to make sure that I just would like to know where we're up to with all of this, the refuge issue, and whether we actually need to at some stage give a stronger policy direction to staff that actually, please avoid refuges and please put your energy into raised intersections or wombat crossings or whatever they are. But just if we could do that on the basis of the latest research, that would be great.
Yeah, look, I'm in your hands, and gaining current understanding of the current research and systems has got to be a good thing, I would have thought.
Okay, thanks, Lord Mayor. Yeah, look, I'm happy with that addition there, that amendment, which you've moved the item, have you? And so you'll include that.
Yep.
So but yeah, to you, Neil, I do get confused with how many things we've got on the go. Local area mobility plans, the inner city action plan, there's a whole lot of stuff, and keeping abreast of it all can be a challenge sometimes. But this report's helped consolidate some of the background and understanding that I've got, and I do see the priorities of the Midtown and the Newtown precincts, getting those done. And I'm assuming that we've got the resources to complete those two projects. I think we're still waiting for a grant for Newtown, or we got half the grant for Newtown recently.
Yes, that's correct. We've just been advised today that the funding round is open or very close to being open, so we'll be applying for that. Although we have got money, as I said, some money for some crossings in Newtown under the Vulnerable Road User funding grant. In relation to Midtown, you would have, Kelly, I think, may have mentioned that we want to be guided to some degree with the outcomes of the precinct plan around Elizabeth Street holistically. So we're just looking to pause that until we've got some greater clarity, because we don't want to put in a solution in that Midtown that might be would be inconsistent with what we're recommending as part of the precinct plan, because we might have grander visions for Elizabeth Street for more active transport solutions in that street as a result of the precinct plan. So we're just pausing on that for a little while until we get that outcome from the precinct plan.
And I guess there would also be the added complexity of a proposal coming from UTAS with regard to Melville Street to consider as well.
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay, well, if there's no further comments, we've got that one addition that the Lord Mayor's included. I'll put the item, no dissent, declare that carried. The next item, 6.4, Sullivan's Cove and Salamanca Place update. So, Neil, would you like to?
Yeah, look, I don't know whether you wanted to defer this one. I think Kelly would be happy to defer it. The CEO would be happy to defer this for ELT to have a little bit more of a look at. But if I'm in your hands to some degree. I think the memo is reasonably self-explanatory, but they are going through a difficult time at the moment, some of those businesses, and we felt that not deferring this matter for another 6 to 12 months would be a reasonable proposition.
Yeah, yep, okay. Yeah, look, I'm happy to receive it back at some point, update in say 12 months' time. What do the rest of the committee feel?
Yeah, I think my concern was just that it read a little bit like it was it was kind of going to be a bit like the Battery Point Walkway or something, like it might never come back. And obviously there's been so much work done on it, and the results, I think, broadly for the city and for the place of the first block are really outstanding. And I know it's more complicated with the businesses in the next block, but I think, I would maybe if we could add that, the information be received and noted, and that the project be reconsidered in 12 months or something, or so at least there's a time frame and where it does actually go on the books as something that will definitely come back to us.
Yeah, through you, Chair, I'm certainly happy with that time frame.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, okay, I'm happy. Any other comments?
Well, I mean, if it's a discussion for ELT, then it may well come back earlier than that with greater clarity. So I would hope that it was a bit sooner than that.
Yeah, look, I think I suppose we were concerned at an officer level that some of those businesses had been going through a tough time, and I think it would be prudent for us to at least give them another 6 to 12 months to recover from that before entering into this debate. But so within 12 months, we'd be happy to come back to you.
And Chairman, if it gives the committee comfort, we could say report back no later than 12 months.
Yeah, okay, I'm happy with that. Everyone fine with that addition? Okay, if there's no further comments, I'll put the recommendation. There's additional suggestion.
Sorry, Chair, could I just get a mover for that motion, please?
I think the Lord Mayor moved it. Is that true, Lord Mayor?
Yep.
Okay, and you've got that other additional amendment?
So are we going with that the project be reconsidered in 12 months, or the project be?
Within 12 months, within the next 12 months.
Yeah, the project be reconsidered and brought back to council within the next 12 months or something like that. Yeah.
Okay, all clear with that? Happy with that? Okay, all right. That'll. Any dissent? There being none, declare that carried. And next is 6.5, which is Newtown Road Hospital Development, Computer Parking and Active Travel. And I appreciate the report here. It's hard to design things when something doesn't exist yet. So I'm supportive of, Anyway, we'll have a discussion on this, but I do think active transport plans are really important, but I'll throw it open to the committee for discussion.
Just if I might start, I've just had some feedback from residents who were particularly concerned about this area and were active representatives, and they're suggesting that just in relation to the commuter parking, the amount of commuter parking has increased over the last 3 years, just through residents' observations, especially in Clare, at the start of Clare Street, but would say that down past Jennings Street as well, and most days on street parking areas are taken up with commuters and local workers. So that's one, and I'll pass these on through to the director. They're concerned that during demolition and construction phases of the development, there'll be a significant impact on the parking, and presumably there wasn't anything to suggest that workers and equipment must be parked on site. Was there as part of any of the planning approval, Mr. Noy?
Look, it's normal that we would require a construction management plan, traffic management plan, as part of a development of this size. So I would be surprised if that won't be required to be addressed as part of the conditions of approval, although I don't have them in front of me at the moment. So, but maybe Mr. Gervasoni might have information or would like to comment on that.
Yeah, thanks, Neil. Through the chair, when writing this, I really didn't focus on the planning permit condition because these two items were sort of additional ones directed to council officers. So I'm not familiar what's in there, but certainly it's been common practice for council in recent years to place as a planning permit condition a requirement prior to a building permit being issued, that they provide essentially a traffic management plan and proposal for how they are going to do the demolition and construction and manage the issues associated with that. And we normally would check that and see that there is nothing outrageous or unworkable in what they're proposing before a building permit is issued.
Any further comments?
Well, just some other points. Look, I agree, and we did have a discussion around just in relation to the active transport plan. I mean, it sort of came up with 66 Burnett Street as well when there was that possibility of imposing some sort of developer contribution. But I mean, I think we need to be a lot smarter with how we're planning and delivering on active transport for developments of the future. So I'd certainly support anything that was brought forward this evening in relation to how that overall planning does occur.
Mm-hmm. So through me, I'm the chair. For you, Neil, do we have, or through Robert, do we have sensors in that area in the road?
I'd be surprised, but Robert could confirm.
No, I think the answer is no, we don't.
Mm-hmm. So do we have plans to have sensors all throughout the inner city?
So we've only really got plans to put sensors in to the areas where we're running paid parking. We have a hold at the moment on new areas for sensors, and it's really waiting on the parking policy. We're not going out to put new sensors in at the moment. But we do have relatively quick ways of putting them in if we decide to. So it's relatively low cost and relatively quick to do it. There are also some camera technologies we can use as well if we just want to get a sense of where the commuters are parking on the street. if we're not so interested in exact in exact numbers.
Okay, yeah, because that data would help us confirm or otherwise what the situation is. Yep.
Mhm.
Any further discussion?
Yeah, can I just make a couple of comments and potentially an amendment? So yeah, I understand obviously that the project hasn't started and certainly hasn't finished, and the proponents don't know how many staff they've got. But I'd like to see that we do. There is some sense that that this company will be asked to give us a copy of what they are preparing once the project is complete. So I'm sort of suggesting maybe item 3 of something like, once the project is completed, the CEO ensure that an active travel plan as per the motion on 9 March 2021 is completed and provided to council. And again, I know it was not a condition, it was a request, but I think we do want to know that the loop has been closed. I'm pretty concerned about construction because I think it's going to require a hell of a lot of tradies, and I don't know how we're going to. I mean, would we, for example, require that the company purchase some spaces or something? I mean, there's a lot of completely unregulated areas, but I think that they're 2 hours or 3 hours up that way. But I do worry that, would the construction management plan actually really tackle them on that? Because it could be an extra 100 vehicles or 50 vehicles a day looking for a park in the streets around there. And unless I don't know where else they can't do it on the site because they'll obviously be cleaning it all up and building it and all that sort of stuff. So I'd like to know a little bit about that bit as well.
Yeah, look, thank you, Lord Mayor, through you, Chair. I mean, yeah, I'll hand it over to Mr. Gervasoni in relation to what they'd normally do, but it would depend on the pressures that were being experienced in adjacent streets, because if there's not an issue in adjacent streets, then there shouldn't be an issue with some of the people. Like if there were, existing houses being renovated with tradies parking in adjacent streets. So, but understand that this is a magnitude far greater than that. So, yeah. Owen, I appreciate your comments in relation to that question.
Yeah, thanks, Neil. And through the chair, look, it's a good point the Lord Mayor makes. Sort of these big sites do create a lot of issues around them. But I guess the way I kind of have looked at it is it's similar to they're going to create issues with noise during the day and those sort of things. It's just kind of inevitable, and it's how we manage it to best protect the interests of people around it. So typically the plan that they would provide would show any parking spaces that they need to have blocked off to facilitate their work. So it might be, if they need a loading zone for trucks to pull up in front or something, it would show those. And we typically, if there are metered spaces, they pay the cost of those spaces, so council recovers that cost. And if it takes out short-term parking, so parking with time limits, that obviously there are time limits there because there are other users, businesses nearby or resident parking zones or something, then we would typically look at that to see whether we need to then provide some more time-limited parking zones to try or to get the developer to do that as part of their plan, to provide an alternative zones to try and best to manage that. So I think we do a reasonable job of that. The difficulty, as the Lord Mayor has sort of suggested, is with all the workers who are working on that big construction site, when they're doing it, because it's a huge mass of people that are in and around and deliveries. A current example is probably the Blue Gum service station on Commercial Road and Elizabeth Street that's being redeveloped into apartments, with Commercial Road and Commercial Lane very sensitive with the residents. So for that example, the residents raised in the consultation, they were very concerned about tradie parking and those sort of things. And what we did for them there is put in some permit zones just for residents, and issued the residents with permits that they can use for that zones, just to make the enforcement very easy. So we do try and do stuff to assist local businesses and residents. Where it probably gets difficult, on Newtown Road, there's time limited parking, so we'll need to be conscious of that to protect the businesses that are there and may be impacted, but that's an enforcement issue as well as changing time limits. For the residents who are in the streets behind, where a lot of potentially the workers would park, currently, essentially all the parking, there are very limited parking at the moment that has any time limit at all. It all has no restrictions. So it's used largely by commuters sort of in the area working, or in this case, it would probably be used by people working at the site because they'll be there earlier. But the reason there's no time limit is because I guess currently we haven't been requested to install a time limit to remove those commuters because presumably there isn't another need for that short-term parking, in that area. That commuter parking is just, I guess, annoying to residents. It's a bit, look at all these people on our streets. So it's difficult in a way, because if it's unrestricted parking, we can't really put any restrictions in to assist the residents, because presumably the residents don't tend to rely on that on-street parking because they generally have their own parking on site at the moment. But these large developments, really all I can say is we look at that plan and we try and make changes to mitigate it, but it certainly has impacts. And sorry, Chair, for talking for so long.
So you might include resident-only permit zones as part of this?
Yeah, certainly possible. Oh, sorry, Chair. Certainly possible, Lord Mayor, because it's the first time we've done it is on Commercial Road, but that's obviously a road, for those familiar with it, under intense pressures with the school and not much off-street parking. So we wouldn't typically look to do it unless there were a lot of residents that absolutely needed the on-street parking. So if everyone's got off-street parking, perhaps we do a couple of, small zones so there's a spot in the street they can be guaranteed in, but I don't think we really want to head down a path where it's a blanket thing that we do all the time, but it's a tool in our quiver, I guess I would say.
Okay, so look, it looks like we'll be crossing these bridges when we get to them. Did you have something additional that you put into the motion then? I can't recall.
There's a couple of things. Just following up from I'd just like to include that addition that it's really just, once the project is completed, that's the hospital, the CEO ensure that an active travel plan, as per the motion on 9 March 2021, is completed and submitted. And Chair, I would like to foreshadow a separate motion just around this broader issue of active travel plans and trying to get them into our planning system, so that there's a bit more of a rhythm about this. The developers of large projects over a certain size expect to get a condition that says, you have to develop this. We've talked about it before, but I wouldn't mind just foreshadowing that a report comes back to council on that.
Okay. No, look, I'll accept that foreshadowed. Well, let's put the first one with that addition. Is there any further comments? If not, I'll put the item. Okay, that's carried. And the foreshadowed motion, I'll ask for any comments on that. I think it's a good idea, and it would have alleviated, say, for example, if we had something in the planning scheme that addressed this, a recent development in North Hobart where we were discussing the lack of parking and whether or not to approve it or not. So I think active travel plans are an important aspect for future planning with regard to big developments where lots of people are coming from a broad catchment, and how do they get there and where do they put their cars and hopefully don't have cars. Any further comments on the foreshadowed?
Can I just get some clarification, Chairman? So the foreshadowed motion is requesting a report on that, is it?
Yes. And this is maybe... Here we are. I'll take advice from you, Mr. Noy. Is this foreshadowed motion that's suitable for this committee, or should it be raised at the planning committee?
Yeah, look, I don't think it really matters. I think the issue is a transport one, but it's is to be reflected through the planning scheme process. So I don't have an issue with it. In relation to the first one, obviously, it's not a condition of planning approval. So while you might pass the motion demanding the CEO or requiring the CEO to extract the active travel plan from the proponent, there won't be any sort of legal standing to enforce that decree, so to speak. So just be mindful of that.
Okay, well, I guess that's addressed then in this foreshadowed motion, where we see if we can enshrine it in the planning scheme, make sure that there is commitment to creating active travel plans for those buildings that will cause additional traffic in areas or conditional traffic change in traffic conditions. Okay, so are we all clear what we're doing with the second foreshadowed? With the foreshadowed motion. Okay, if there's no further discussion and no dissent to that foreshadowed motion, okay, I'll declare that carried. Moving on to item 6.6. Look, we've had a petition tabled at council on Monday, which may have an impact on this report. So there's been suggestions that we might defer this. I'll put it to the committee. Do you think it should?
Look, yes, Chairman, I'm happy to defer this based on that petition request. So I think that probably needs to be considered. Okay.
Well, I'll put the deferral motion. Any dissent? No dissent. I will declare that carried. That's deferred for now. Item 6.7, Letitia Street subdivision on-street parking in the area.
Move that, Chairman, that it be received and noted. I don't think there's anything more to be done with this.
Okay, all right. Any further comments? There being none, I'll put the item. No dissent. Declare that carried. Item 7 is the committee action status report. Any comments on the report?
Chairman, I have a question relating to, I think it's item 17. It's the Argyle and Collins Street bike lanes. Just wondering where we are with them. Through you to Mr. Noy.
Yeah, Argyle and Campbell Street. Yes,
sorry.
Yeah, yes. So we've gone out to tender for detailed design work. That we have had one provider respond. So we are going through that process of appointing that provider, so we can get the detail design work done as soon as possible. So
does that just go ahead once that's done, or it doesn't have to come back to us again, does it?
No. We'll be proceeding on the basis of that detailed design. We need consent. Mr. Baird might correct me, but we'll need consent from state growth when we're talking about any changes to lights and the like. And we'll want to keep the elected members informed as to any commencement program of work. So, but yeah, I don't intend necessarily to be coming back to any committee by the time before rolling this out on the ground.
Mm-hmm. All right.
Can I just ask, has the money been received for it from the state government?
Maybe Mr. Baird could confirm. I believe we've got we've signed the deed for the funding. So,
Yeah,
Mr.
so
Baird?
the deed, through the chair, the grant deeds have been signed off, and invoicing is in progress. As to whether or not we've actually got the cash in the bank, I'm not sure.
Okay. All right.
These particular deeds are, sorry, I should add, these particular deeds are slightly different in that we receive the cash up front. With most of these grant deed arrangements, we receive the cash on completion of the works. This one is slightly different.
All right.
May I also ask a question around item 19, just around the progress? I was asked about this at Lena Valley last night, just the progress on the implementation of the 40 kilometres an hour in the suburban areas.
Mr. Baird?
So in this particular instance in Lena Valley, it is in our design pipeline for probably around January of this year. The design is quite simple and straightforward. The signage, the electronic signage, is being procured as we speak from the provider, that is a state growth provider, given that these signs then go over to state growth to manage and operate afterwards. So we expect this to be all installed probably February, March of next year.
So that's just Lena Valley, or is that all of them?
No, that's just Lena Valley, and then we will move progressively through the others that are on the list.
Okay. We're good to move this. Someone like to move it? Thanks,
Sorry,
Tim.
I just had a quick question on number 8, parklet policy. It just looks like it's from quite a while ago, and I'm just wondering where we're at with that.
Yes, Chair, I'm happy to advise that we've developed a position on that, and we hope to have that reported up in the coming months. So.
Sorry, I do just have one more because it came up and I just didn't get in quickly enough. Just when you were talking, Neil, about the Elizabeth Street and the changes potentially waiting until we've completed the precinct plan, I'm just wondering, would you remove the temporary parklets and put parking back and then go through all of that again?
No. It would be our intention to keep those parklets in place, Chair, while we work through this more holistic response to Elizabeth Street and in response to the precincts plan outcomes.
Okay, all right.
But sorry, Chair, I would add that we do want to report on that back to committee in terms of the success or otherwise of the program after 12 months.
Sure, okay.
Okay, Deputy, I think you put this motion. Okay, I'll sorry, you moved the motion. I'll put it. All those in favour? Any dissent? Okay, declare that carried. Item 10 is item 8 is responses to questions without notice. Would somebody like to move that? Thanks, Councillor Fox. No dissent. Item 9 is questions without notice. No questions. Okay. Would someone like to move item 10, closed portion of the meeting? Thank you, Councillor Fox.